I'm Amber, 34, and I'm still in shock over what happened at my sister Melissa's wedding anniversary dinner last night. You're adopted, so you're not really family. Go find another table, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Then she handed me the bill for $3,270 as she and her husband walked out. Our parents just sat there, stunned silent. 20 years of suspecting I was treated differently because I was adopted, but never imagining my own sister would humiliate me so publicly, then stick me with a bill I couldn't possibly afford. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you'll understand what I'm about to share. This is probably the most personal story I've ever told publicly. While I gather my thoughts, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, and if you connect with family drama stories like mine, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what happened next in this nightmare family dinner changed everything about who I thought I was. Growing up as Amber Harper, I always knew I was different. From my earliest memories, there was this sense of being the odd one out, like a puzzle piece from another box that someone tried to force to fit. My parents, Diane and Richard Harper, adopted me when I was 3 years old after struggling with fertility issues for years. They already had Melissa, who was 5 at the time, their biological miracle after years of trying. The physical differences between us were impossible to ignore. The Harpers were all tall, blonde, with striking blue eyes and athletic builds. Meanwhile, I was petite with dark hair and hazel eyes. In family photos, we looked like I might be a friend who happened to be visiting when the photographer showed up. "Stand over here, Amber," was the constant refrain during family portraits. Always positioned slightly apart, on the edge, or in some cases, asked to take a separate photo just in case. Just in case of what? I never asked. Melissa was the golden child in every sense of the word. By the time I started kindergarten, she was already being noticed for her academic and athletic abilities. As we grew up, the pattern only intensified. Homecoming queen, class president, captain of the volleyball team, valedictorian. Every achievement was celebrated with dinner parties, announcements in the local paper, and endless praise from our parents. "Melissa sets the standard in this family," my dad would say, not realizing how those words cut me down. My own accomplishments never seemed to measure up. I maintained straight A's throughout school, won the state debate championship twice, and graduated with honors, but my achievements were acknowledged with simple good jobs and quick hugs. When I won the state debate finals, my parents missed it because Melissa had a college campus tour the same weekend. "You understand, don't you, honey? This is important for her future," my mom explained. I understood perfectly what they were really saying. It wasn't that Melissa was overtly cruel to me growing up. It was more subtle, a constant undermining of our sisterly relationship. The casual comments about how I looked nothing like the rest of the family. The jokes about how I was probably switched at the adoption agency. The way she would introduce me to her friends as my adopted sister rather than just my sister. "Remember, Amber, being adopted means mom and dad chose you." They got stuck with me, she would say with a laugh when others were around. But when we were alone, she made it clear that being chosen wasn't the same as belonging. Despite all this, I tried desperately to belong. I learned to cook the family recipes, I participated in the Harper family traditions, I even took up tennis because it was our family sport. Nothing seemed to bridge the gap. When Melissa met Nathan Wilson during her senior year of college, things got even worse. Nathan came from old money, with a family name that appeared on buildings around town. He had the same golden looks as Melissa, and they made the perfect power couple. From the moment they started dating, Nathan looked at me like I was an intruder in the family. He would forget to include me in conversations, talk over me at family gatherings, and once even referred to me as the charity case when he thought I couldn't hear. They married in a lavish ceremony that cost more than my entire college education. I was a bridesmaid, but not the maid of honor, despite being Melissa's only sister. That role went to her sorority sister, Brittany. "It's just that Brittany and I have more in common," Melissa explained without a trace of remorse. After college, I became a kindergarten teacher, a career I loved, but that didn't impress my status-conscious family. Melissa, meanwhile, climbed the corporate ladder at her father-in-law's investment firm, becoming a junior executive by 30. Their life was a showcase of wealth and achievement, from their mansion in the exclusive Lakewood Hills neighborhood to their matching luxury cars and annual European vacations. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Riverdale, a nice but definitely middle-class area of town. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and considered a weekend trip to the beach a major vacation. The income disparity between us was enormous, yet whenever there was a family celebration, I was expected to contribute equally to gifts and sometimes even venue costs. "Family all chips in the same," my dad would say, conveniently ignoring that my monthly salary probably equaled what Melissa spent on shoes. My boyfriend of 3 years, James, ultimately couldn't handle the Harper family dynamics. "I can't watch them treat you like this anymore," he said when we broke up 6 months ago. "And I can't be with someone who won't stand up for themselves." His words hurt because I knew they were true. I had become so accustomed to being the family doormat that I didn't know how to be anything else. Every holiday, every milestone, every family gathering was a reminder of my second-class status. But what happened at Melissa's anniversary dinner went beyond anything I could have imagined, even from them. The text from Melissa arrived 3 weeks before the dinner. 10th anniversary celebration at Le Chateau. June 15, 7 p.m. Formal attire. You'll be there. Not a question, a command. Le Chateau was the most exclusive restaurant in town, where entrees started at $75 and the wine list read like a wealthy person's shopping spree. I immediately felt a knot form in my stomach. I had been saving every spare dollar toward graduate school in educational therapy, a program that would start in the fall. My savings were precious and limited, and a dinner at Le Chateau would easily set me back a few $100s I couldn't afford to spend. "Are you sure you have to go?" Rachel asked when I called her in a panic. Rachel had been my best friend since college, and she'd witnessed enough Harper family dysfunction to last a lifetime. "Can't you just say you're sick?" "You don't understand," I sighed. "If I don't show up, it'll be brought up at every family gathering for the next decade. Remember the time Amber missed Melissa's special night?" I mimicked my mother's disappointed tone. "Then go, but set a budget. Get an appetizer instead of an entree, drink water, and leave after the cake," Rachel suggested practically. The next day, another text from Melissa: "Make sure you bring an appropriate gift. Don't embarrass us like last Christmas." Last Christmas, I had given them a handmade quilt that took me 3 months to complete. Melissa had opened it, said a quick thanks, and set it aside in favor of the designer handbag my parents gave her. I spent hours browsing online, trying to find something meaningful but affordable. Eventually, I settled on creating a custom photo album documenting their decade together, with spaces for memories to come. It cost me $150 for the high-quality printing and binding, a significant expense but something I thought showed effort and thoughtfulness. The day before the dinner, I found myself at the mall, panic buying a new dress for the occasion. My teaching wardrobe didn't include anything formal enough for Le Chateau, and Melissa would certainly comment if I wore something she'd seen before. I found a simple black dress on the clearance rack at Nordstrom for $120, more than I wanted to spend but less than I'd feared. As I drove home with the dress, memories of previous Harper family gatherings flooded back. Melissa's college graduation party, where she thanked everyone in her speech except me. The family Christmas where I received bath products while Melissa got diamond earrings. My own 30th birthday, which my parents forgot entirely because it fell on the same weekend as Nathan's family's annual lake house gathering. That night, I called Rachel again. "I'm having anxiety attacks about tomorrow," I admitted. "I keep imagining all the ways Melissa will find to make me feel small." "Then prepare for it," Rachel said firmly. "Expect it, so when it happens, you're not caught off guard. And remember, you can always leave if it gets too bad." The morning of the dinner arrived, and I spent it getting ready as if preparing for battle. I got my hair trimmed and styled, painted my nails, and carefully applied makeup to look my best. I wrapped the photo album in silver paper with a handwritten card. I practiced positive affirmations in the mirror. You are worthy. You belong. You are enough. Words I desperately wanted to believe. I arrived at Le Chateau 15 minutes early, not wanting to give Melissa any ammunition about punctuality. The valet took my Honda with a barely concealed smirk as he moved it away from the line of luxury vehicles. The restaurant lobby was already filled with elaborate flower arrangements bearing happy anniversary ribbons. A champagne tower stood ready, bottles of Dom Perignon chilling in ice buckets. This was going to be even more extravagant than I'd feared. My parents arrived moments after I did, both looking uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings despite their own comfortable lifestyle. "Amber, you look nice," my mother said, her tone suggesting surprise. "Yes, very presentable," my father added, as if I had just passed an inspection. Before we could talk further, they pulled out a small wrapped box. "We're giving this to Melissa and Nathan before dinner," my mother explained, opening it to reveal a pair of cruise tickets. 2 weeks in the Mediterranean. They've been working so hard, they deserve a break. I thought of my unused passport and the vacation days I'd never taken because I couldn't afford to go anywhere. The private dining room took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flower centerpieces, personalized menus at each place setting, and an elaborate ice sculpture of Melissa and Nathan's initials. A small army of servers stood ready with trays of champagne. I noticed the place cards and felt my heart sink. Mine was at the far end of the table, separated from my immediate family by Nathan's cousins and some friends I barely knew. As I adjusted my place card slightly, trying not to feel hurt, I overheard Melissa talking to the maitre d'. "Yes, my sister will handle the bill at the end of the night. We've arranged everything with her." I froze, unsure if I'd heard correctly. Surely she couldn't mean. But before I could process this, the room began filling with guests, and the evening that would change everything began to unfold. Le Chateau's private dining room glittered with wealth and privilege. Crystal stemware caught the light from the custom chandeliers, white linen tablecloths draped perfectly to the floor, and each place setting featured gold-rimmed china bearing the restaurant's crest. Melissa and Nathan had spared no expense, or rather, as I would soon discover, they had spared no expense on my credit card. Extended family members began to arrive, the Harpers and Wilsons mingling in their finery. Aunt Patricia air-kissed my cheeks before immediately turning to find Melissa. Uncle Robert gave me a distracted hello before gravitating toward the bar. My cousins, all tall and blonde like the rest of the family, formed their usual clique near the windows, occasionally glancing my way but making no move to include me. Nathan's family arrived en masse, the women draped in designer clothing, the men in custom suits, all bearing extravagantly wrapped packages. I clutched my silver-wrapped photo album, suddenly feeling childish for thinking it would be enough. At precisely 7, Melissa and Nathan made their grand entrance. She wore a champagne-colored Versace gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary, her hair and makeup professionally done. Nathan matched her in a tailored tuxedo, looking every bit the wealthy scion he was. "Welcome, everyone, to our celebration of love and family," Melissa announced, raising a glass. "It means so much to have our real family here tonight." The subtle emphasis on real didn't escape me, nor did the quick glance in my direction. We were seated for dinner, and as I'd noted earlier, I was placed at the far end of the table, wedged between Nathan's cousin Greg, who was already drunk, and his girlfriend whose name I couldn't catch over the noise. My parents sat near Melissa and Nathan, laughing and engaged in animated conversation that I couldn't hear from my distant position. The menu was fixed, but with numerous optional upgrades and supplements. I watched in growing horror as Melissa loudly encouraged everyone to go all out. "Please, everyone, add the truffle supplement to your pasta course," she announced. "And don't miss the Wagyu beef upgrade for the main course. It's divine, and tonight is special." Nathan began ordering wine for the table, casually selecting bottles that I could see were priced at $600 each. Each time a new bottle appeared, my mental calculation of the bill grew, along with my anxiety. Between the appetizer and pasta courses, Melissa circulated among the guests, making a point to speak with everyone except me. When she finally approached my end of the table, she spoke only to Greg, leaning across me as if I wasn't there. "Greg, so glad you could make it. The sommelier has that special Bordeaux your father loves. Make sure he knows it's available." I attempted to join the conversation. "The appetizers are amazing, Melissa. Congratulations on 10 wonderful years." She glanced at me as if just noticing I was there. "Oh. Thanks." Then immediately turned back to Greg. "So how was Aspen last month?" "We're thinking of buying a property there." During the pasta course, I tried to connect with my cousin Samantha, who was seated across from me. Unlike the rest of the family, Samantha had always been kind to me, perhaps because as Uncle Robert's stepdaughter, she understood something about feeling like an outsider. "How's teaching going?" she asked warmly. "Your kindergartners must adore you." Before I could answer, Melissa's voice cut across the table. "Everyone, a toast to family traditions and legacies that live on through blood." More pointed looks in my direction. More champagne poured. The servers brought out the next course, each plate looking like an edible work of art, garnished with gold leaf and exotic ingredients. When it came time for gifts, mine was placed at the bottom of the pile. I watched as Melissa and Nathan opened present after present. Crystal vases, luxury watches, artwork, and envelopes that clearly contained substantial checks. My parents' cruise tickets were met with squeals of delight and effusive thanks. When they finally reached my photo album, Melissa barely glanced at it before setting it aside unopened. "How crafty." "Thank you, Amber." The slideshow began shortly after, projected onto one wall of the dining room. Photo after photo chronicled Melissa and Nathan's life together, with frequent appearances by my parents, Nathan's family, and their friends. I appeared in exactly 3 photos, always at the edge of group shots, partially cropped out in one. As dessert was served, an elaborate construction of chocolate and sponge sugar, Melissa tapped her glass for attention. "Nathan and I have some exciting news," she announced, her hand moving to rest on her stomach. "We're expecting. Mom, Dad, your first grandchild will arrive this December." The room erupted in cheers. My parents embraced her, both wiping away tears. Nathan's parents immediately began discussing trust funds and legacy admissions to their alma maters. "Congratulations," I said, approaching them during the commotion. "I'm so happy for you both. I can't wait to be an aunt." Melissa looked at me coolly. "Well, technically, you won't really be an aunt, will you?" "Not by blood." "Melissa, I've been your sister for 30 years, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Have you, though?" she replied with a raised eyebrow before turning away to accept more congratulations. The final dessert course arrived, individual soufflés with gold leaf decorations and imported chocolate sauce poured tableside. Each plate was a work of art that probably cost what I spent on groceries for a week. I couldn't eat mine, my stomach knotted with tension and humiliation. I looked around the table and noticed several guests looking uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding my eyes. Whatever was happening, I wasn't the only one who felt it. The tension in the room was palpable, building towards something I couldn't yet see but could definitely feel coming. The evening was winding down. Coffee and digestives had been served, and people were beginning to check their watches and murmur about babysitters and early meetings. I was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster but felt relief that the ordeal was nearly over. That's when Melissa stood up and tapped her glass one final time. The room quieted, all eyes turning to the radiant woman in the champagne gown. My sister, though in that moment, I had never felt less connected to her. "Before everyone leaves, I want to express my gratitude," she began, her voice carrying that practiced public speaking tone she'd perfected over years of corporate presentations. "Nathan and I are overwhelmed by your love and support." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room before landing directly on me. Something in her expression changed, a hardness entering her eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "Family is everything to us," she continued. "Real family. Blood family." The silence in the room deepened as several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Speaking of which, Melissa's voice took on a cutting edge. I think there's been some confusion about seating arrangements tonight. She walked toward me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown. Amber, she said, standing over me now, you're adopted, so you're not really family. Go find another table. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. Around me, guests stared at their plates or looked away, no one willing to intervene. Melissa, my mother finally gasped, but made no move to come to my side. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Nathan stood beside Melissa now, his arm around her waist, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. While you're at it, Melissa continued, pulling a leather folder from the server who had materialized beside her, you can take care of this. We've got to run. She dropped the bill folder in front of me with a theatrical flourish. Inside was a bill for $3,270.48, along with a handwritten note that read, "You owe us for pretending you belong." But I can't. I don't. I stammered, looking at the astronomical figure. Problem? Nathan asked with false concern. I thought teachers were all about giving. Consider it your contribution to your niece or nephew's future. My parents finally approached, but instead of defending me, they looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. Melissa, this isn't appropriate, my mother whispered, not meeting my eyes. We should discuss this privately, my father added, looking anxiously around at the other guests. Nothing to discuss, Melissa replied cheerfully. Amber agreed to handle the bill. Didn't you, sis? The last word dripped with sarcasm. I started, but Melissa cut me off. Of course you did. Why else would you be here? With that, she linked arms with Nathan and my parents, and they walked out together, leaving me alone with the bill and a room full of increasingly awkward guests who began making hasty exits. The restaurant manager approached, all professional courtesy. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Harper, he said, nodding at the bill folder. I opened my purse with trembling hands and pulled out my credit card, knowing full well it had nowhere near the required credit limit. My entire checking account held less than half the amount needed. Is everything all right? The manager asked as minutes passed and I sat frozen. I can't pay this, I whispered, humiliation burning through me. I never agreed to this. My sister, she. A panic attack seized me, my chest tightening as tears spilled down my cheeks. Some remaining guests pretended not to notice, while others whispered behind their hands. My cousin Samantha approached, putting her hand on my shoulder. Amber, are you okay? That was horrible, what just happened? I couldn't respond through my tears, simply showing her the bill. $3,000? Samantha gasped. That's insane. Did you know about this? I shook my head, trying to control my breathing. I can loan you some, Samantha offered, opening her purse. I have about $400 cash, and I could put another $5 on my card, but... The manager was becoming visibly impatient. Ms. Harper, we need to resolve this bill. Should I contact the other Ms. Harper who arranged the event? No. I gasped, mortified at the thought of giving Melissa more ammunition. Please, just give me a minute. I locked myself in the bathroom stall and called Rachel, sobbing as I explained the situation. Those absolute monsters, Rachel hissed. Stay put. I'm coming to get you, and we'll figure this out. When I emerged, the dining room was empty except for Samantha and the increasingly stern-looking manager. Ms. Harper, I'm afraid I need to run your card now, or we'll have to discuss other arrangements. I handed over my credit card, knowing what would happen. Sure enough, it was declined. The manager's expression hardened. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding, he said coldly. The reservation was made under Melissa Wilson, but we were explicitly told that Amber Harper would be handling payment. Ms. Wilson provided your contact information for our records. The full weight of what had happened crushed down on me. This wasn't a spontaneous act of cruelty. This was premeditated. Planned. orchestrated to humiliate me as thoroughly as possible. I've never felt more alone than I did in that moment, standing in an empty restaurant, surrounded by the debris of a celebration I was never truly part of, facing a bill I couldn't pay for people who had just publicly rejected me. When Rachel arrived 20 minutes later, I was sitting numbly in the lobby while the manager made tense phone calls from his office. The evening had gone from bad to catastrophic, but I had no idea that the worst revelation was yet to come. If you've ever had a moment where your entire world flipped upside down, you know how I felt that night. We're only halfway through this story, and believe me, what happens next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, because what my parents revealed the next day made this dinner disaster seem almost trivial in comparison. Rachel drove me home in silence, occasionally glancing over with worry etched across her face. I stared out the window, too numb to cry, too shocked to speak. The humiliation at the restaurant had been resolved temporarily with Rachel putting down her credit card as a deposit and promising to return the next day to work out a payment plan. The manager had been coldly professional but clearly disapproving, as if I were attempting to commit fraud rather than being the victim of it. "You're staying with me tonight," Rachel said as we approached my apartment. It wasn't a question. "Pack a bag. I don't trust you to be alone after what those people did to you." I didn't argue. The thought of being alone with my thoughts terrified me. We stopped briefly at my place, where I mechanically packed an overnight bag, my movements robotic and disconnected. At Rachel's apartment, she made tea and sat me down on her couch, wrapping me in her softest blanket like I was a shock victim, which in many ways, I was. "I can't believe they did that to you," she said for perhaps the 10th time. "Actually, no, I can believe it. They've been awful to you for years, but this is a new low even for them." I stared into my tea. "I don't understand why. What did I ever do to make Melissa hate me so much?" "Nothing," Rachel said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. This is about her, not you." Sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned on Rachel's pull-out couch, replaying the events of the evening, each memory bringing fresh waves of shame and confusion. By morning, my phone showed 17 missed calls from my parents, but not a single voicemail. Typical. They wanted to talk to me, but not badly enough to actually leave a message about what they wanted to say. "Are you going to call them back?" Rachel asked over coffee. "I have to," I said quietly. "I need to understand why they let this happen." Rachel squeezed my hand. "I'll be right here." I dialed my mother's number, putting the phone on speaker so Rachel could hear. "Amber," my mother answered immediately. "Thank goodness. We've been so worried." "Worried?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "You left me at the restaurant with a $3,000 bill I couldn't pay. You walked out with Melissa after she humiliated me in front of everyone we know." "It's complicated, sweetie," my mother sighed. "Your father and we didn't know what she was planning. We were as shocked as you were." "But you still left with her," I pointed out, anger finally beginning to cut through the numbness. "We needed to talk to her, to understand what was happening," my mother explained weakly. "We drove her and Nathan home and had a very serious conversation. And?" A pause. "Your sister has always been difficult. Complicated. You know that. Mom, she publicly disowned me and stuck me with a bill that's more than my monthly salary." Another pause, longer this time. "Your father wants to speak with you. Can you come over today?" I looked at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. "Fine. I'll be there at noon." Rachel drove me to my parents' house in the suburbs, a spacious colonial where I'd grown up but never truly felt at home. "Call me the second you want to leave," she insisted. "I'll wait at the coffee shop down the street." My parents answered the door together, both looking like they hadn't slept. My mother attempted to hug me, but I stepped back, not ready for physical contact or easy forgiveness. We sat in the formal living room, the space we always used for serious conversations. Family photos lined the mantel, and I noticed with fresh perspective how in each one, Melissa was centered while I was positioned slightly apart. Amber, my father began, uncharacteristically hesitant. What happened last night was unacceptable. Your mother and I want you to know we don't condone Melissa's behavior. Yet you did nothing to stop it, I replied flatly. And you still haven't asked if I'm okay or how I managed to pay that bill. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. The thing is, my mother said slowly, Melissa has always had issues with you being part of the family. Because I'm adopted, I stated. Another glance between them, heavy with unspoken communication. The truth is more complicated than that, my father said finally, his voice strained. Melissa found something out a few years ago, something we've never discussed as a family. My heart began to race. Found out what? My father took a deep breath. You weren't adopted through an agency as we told you. The room seemed to tilt. What are you saying? You're my biological daughter, my father said quietly. From a brief relationship I had during a rough patch in our marriage. Your biological mother couldn't raise you, and Diane agreed to raise you as our adopted daughter to save our marriage. The words hit me like physical blows. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You're telling me I'm your actual daughter? I whispered, looking at my father. And you've been lying to me my entire life? We thought it was for the best, my mother said, tears in her eyes. Richard and I had separated for a few months. When he came back and told me about the pregnancy, I was devastated. But I loved him, and eventually, I agreed to raise you as our child, as long as no one ever knew the truth. So I'm not adopted. I'm your biological child. I turned to my father, decades of confusion suddenly making horrific sense. That's why I look like Grandma Sophie. That's why I have your eyes. He nodded, unable to speak. Melissa found your original birth certificate, my mother continued. It was in some old papers in the attic. She confronted us, and she was furious. She felt betrayed, like our whole family story was a lie. It was a lie. I shouted, anger finally breaking through. My entire identity is based on a lie you told me. We were trying to protect everyone, my father pleaded. Diane, you, Melissa, our reputation in the community. And Melissa has been punishing me ever since she found out, I realized aloud. How long has she known? My parents exchanged another look. About 5 years, my mother admitted. Around when she met Nathan. 5 years. 5 years of escalating coldness, of pointed comments, of deliberate exclusion. 5 years of Melissa knowing something fundamental about my identity that I didn't know myself. Last night wasn't just about humiliating me, I said, the pieces falling into place. It was revenge. Punishment for something I had no control over, no knowledge of. Melissa feels that our family narrative was destroyed when she learned the truth, my father said. She believes that by bringing you into our home, we betrayed her. And what do you believe? I asked, looking directly at my mother, the woman who had raised me but always kept me at arm's length. I believe we made mistakes, she said carefully. Many mistakes. But taking you in wasn't one of them. Taking me in, I repeated. Not raising your husband's daughter as your own. Just taking me in, like a stray cat. That's not what I meant, she protested weakly. What about the bill? I asked, abruptly changing subjects. $3,000 I don't have. My father shifted uncomfortably. If you absolutely can't manage it, we can help. If I can't manage it? I echoed in disbelief. I'm a kindergarten teacher with student loans. Of course I can't manage a surprise $3,000 bill for a dinner I didn't even want to attend. We'll talk to Melissa, my mother said quickly. Perhaps she can be reasonable about this. Reasonable? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. She orchestrated this entire situation to humiliate me. She's known I'm her half-sister for 5 years and chose to torture me with that information rather than talk to me about it. Melissa has always been sensitive, my father said, defaulting to the excuse they'd used my entire life. And I've always been expendable, I replied, standing up. The secret daughter, the family shame, the one you could all treat however you wanted because I should just be grateful you took me in. Amber, please, my mother reached for my hand. We're trying to make this right. No, you're trying to manage the situation, just like you've always done, I said, pulling away. For 30 years, you've allowed Melissa to mistreat me because of your guilt. You've treated me as less than her because I was living proof of Dad's affair. And you never once considered how any of this would affect me. What can we do? My father asked, looking genuinely lost. You can start by telling me the truth about my biological mother, I said firmly. Then you can pay that restaurant bill that your precious daughter arranged as her idea of family justice. And then maybe, just maybe, we can talk about whether there's anything worth salvaging in this relationship. As I left my parents' house that day, I felt my entire identity crumbling. I wasn't who I thought I was. My family wasn't what I thought it was. The narrative of my life had been completely rewritten in the span of 24 hours, and I had no idea what came next or who I would be on the other side of this revelation. They need to be held accountable, Rachel said firmly. We were sitting in her apartment with my cousin Samantha, who had reached out after the dinner disaster to offer support. All three of them. What they did was beyond cruel. I sat wrapped in a blanket despite the summer heat, still feeling chilled to the bone by the revelations of the past 2 days. I don't even know where to begin, I admitted. My entire identity feels like a lie. Start by knowing your rights, Rachel suggested. My friend Taylor is an attorney. Let me call her. Taylor arrived an hour later, a sharp-eyed woman in crisp business attire who listened to my story with increasing indignation. When I finished, she set her coffee cup down with purpose. Let's be clear about a few things, she said. What Melissa did with that restaurant bill is fraud. She represented to the establishment that you would pay without your knowledge or consent. That's actionable. I don't know if I want to sue my sister, I said uncertainly. You don't have to make any decisions today, Taylor assured me. But what we should do is gather evidence while it's fresh. Document everything that happened, collect any proof you can find, and then you'll have options. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life story. With Rachel and Samantha's help, I began systematically gathering evidence of what had happened, and in the process, uncovered patterns I'd been too close to see before. Our first stop was my parents' house when they were at work. Using the spare key they'd never asked me to return, I searched for documentation of my birth and adoption. In a family Bible tucked away on a high shelf, I found my original birth certificate, folded and tucked between pages, listing Richard Harper as my father and a woman named Elizabeth Thornton as my mother. Elizabeth Thornton, I whispered, finally having a name for the woman who gave birth to me. The certificate listed her address at the time, a starting point if I ever wanted to find her. Next, we carefully searched Melissa's social media accounts and found a disturbing pattern of posts subtly denigrating me over the years, along with private messages to family members that Samantha had access to, explicitly telling them I had volunteered to handle the anniversary dinner bill. Look at this, Samantha said, showing me a group text from 2 weeks before the dinner. She told everyone you insisted on paying as your anniversary gift to them. Email records showed Melissa had been planning this setup for months. She had corresponded with Le Chateau, specifying that while she would make all the arrangements, my sister Amber Harper will be handling payment on the night of the event. She had signed my name to online forms without my knowledge or consent. This is absolutely fraud, Taylor confirmed when we showed her the emails. She impersonated you to create a financial obligation. Through Samantha's connections, we discovered that the restaurant had security cameras in the private dining room. After Taylor sent a formal letter, they provided footage showing Melissa explicitly telling the staff that I would pay, along with her dramatic presentation of the bill at the end of the evening. The restaurant could potentially be liable as well, Taylor noted. They accepted a payment arrangement from someone other than the person they were charging. As we dug deeper, we learned that Melissa's manipulative behavior extended far beyond me. Former friends came forward with stories of how she had sabotaged relationships, spread rumors, and created elaborate schemes to punish people who crossed her. Lindsay, Nathan's ex-girlfriend from before Melissa, reached out after hearing about the incident through mutual friends. She systematically destroyed my relationship with Nathan by planting false evidence that I was cheating, she revealed over coffee. I lost friends, my reputation, and nearly my job because of her lies. At my request, the restaurant provided an itemized receipt showing Melissa had deliberately ordered the most expensive items for every course, added premium supplements and surcharges at every opportunity, and ordered multiple bottles of high-end wine despite knowing I wouldn't be drinking. Through old family videos that I'd never paid much attention to before, I noted the subtle ways my parents had always treated Melissa and me differently. Lavish praise for her minor accomplishments, muted acknowledgement of my major ones. Better gifts, more attention, more physical affection. The pattern was painfully obvious when viewed chronologically. The most shocking discovery came when Samantha found financial records in my uncle's office showing my parents had established a substantial trust fund for Melissa but nothing for me. The documentation explicitly stated that the trust was for our biological daughter, Melissa Harper Wilson, with a legal clause excluding any adopted children from inheritance. They legally disinherited you while pretending you were a full member of the family, Taylor said, examining the documents. This isn't just emotional abuse, it's financial discrimination. When I confronted my parents about the trust fund, they admitted that Nathan's father, a financial advisor, had suggested the arrangement to protect family assets. We always intended to leave you something in our will, my father said weakly. But not an equal share, I noted, and their silence confirmed it. The final piece of evidence came from the restaurant manager, who had become increasingly sympathetic to my situation as the truth emerged. He confirmed that Melissa had specifically arranged for the bill to be presented to me at the end of the evening, requesting that it be delivered with theatrical flair to create a memorable moment. She said it was a surprise gift arrangement, he explained uncomfortably. That you had insisted on paying but wanted it to be a surprise for the other guests. As the evidence mounted, my shock and hurt began to transform into something else, resolve. For the first time I could see clearly how I had been manipulated and mistreated not just by Melissa, but by my entire family system. The dinner disaster wasn't an isolated incident but the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as less than, of being the family's secret shame rather than a full member. What do you want to do with all this? Taylor asked as we organized the evidence into a comprehensive file. You have multiple options, from civil action to simply using this for leverage in a family confrontation. I thought about it carefully. I want the truth to be known, I said finally. Not just about the dinner, but about everything. No more family secrets, no more pretending. And I want accountability, real accountability, not just empty apologies. Then let's arrange a meeting, Taylor suggested. On your terms, with all of this evidence ready to present. For the first time since that horrible night at Le Chateau, I felt a sense of power returning. The truth, as painful as it was, had set something free inside me. I was no longer the family doormat, the grateful adopted child who should accept whatever scraps of affection were thrown my way. I was Richard Harper's daughter, as much a Harper as Melissa ever was, and it was time the whole family acknowledged that reality. I chose my parents' house for the meeting, the place where so many family dynamics had been established and reinforced over the years. This time, however, I wouldn't be the outsider seeking approval. I would be the one setting the terms. Taylor accompanied me, dressed in a professional suit that conveyed authority without aggression. Rachel and Samantha waited nearby, providing moral support and ready to join us if needed. I had invited my parents, Melissa, and Nathan, giving them little information beyond that I wanted to resolve the situation from the anniversary dinner. I arrived early to set up, placing my evidence file on the coffee table and arranging seats so that I would be facing the family as a unit rather than being positioned as an outsider. When the doorbell rang at the appointed time, my heart raced, but I felt surprisingly calm. The truth was on my side this time. My parents entered first, looking anxious and uncertain. "Amber, we're glad you wanted to talk," my mother began, then stopped short when she saw Taylor. "This is my attorney, Taylor Wilson," I said calmly. "She's here to help facilitate our discussion." Before they could respond, Melissa and Nathan arrived, looking confident and slightly annoyed, as if this meeting were an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. "Let's make this quick," Melissa said, settling onto the couch with Nathan beside her. "I assume you've called us here to apologize for ruining our anniversary celebration?" The sheer audacity of her statement might have silenced me in the past. Today, it only strengthened my resolve. "Actually," I replied evenly, "I've called you here to address the fraud you committed at Le Chateau, along with several other family matters that have gone unaddressed for too long." "Fraud?" Nathan scoffed. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Taylor asked, opening the evidence file and laying out documents one by one. "We have emails showing that Melissa arranged for Amber to be charged without her knowledge or consent. We have text messages to family members misrepresenting Amber's intentions. We have security footage from the restaurant showing Melissa explicitly instructing staff that Amber would pay. In legal terms, that's fraud, misrepresentation, and possibly identity theft." The confidence drained from Nathan's face as he looked at the evidence before us. Melissa's expression hardened, her eyes darting between the documents and my face. "This is absurd," she tried again, but her voice lacked conviction. "It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding you planned for months," I countered, showing her the emails to the restaurant dating back to March. "A misunderstanding that coincidentally humiliated me in front of our entire family and social circle. A misunderstanding that stuck me with a bill you knew I couldn't possibly afford." My parents sat in stunned silence, looking at the mountain of evidence we'd assembled. "Melissa," my father finally said, "did you really do all this?" "Don't act surprised," she snapped. "You know why I did it. She's been pretending to be a Harper for 30 years when she's really just your mistake." The room went silent at her outburst. "And there it is," I said quietly. "The truth behind all of this. I'm not actually adopted, am I, Melissa? I'm Dad's biological daughter, which means I'm just as much a Harper as you are. And that's what you can't stand. You are not my sister." Melissa hissed. "You're the product of our father cheating on our mother. You should never have been part of this family." "Melissa," my mother gasped. "That's enough." I looked at my mother, seeing something new in her eyes. Not just guilt, but a glimmer of genuine regret. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn a place in this family," I said, addressing all of them. "Trying to be good enough, accomplished enough, selfless enough to be accepted. And all this time, you've been lying to me about who I am while treating me as less than because of circumstances I had no control over." Nathan had been examining the legal documents more carefully, his professional training as an investment banker making him quicker than Melissa to recognize the seriousness of the situation. "What exactly are you seeking here, Amber?" he asked, his tone suddenly businesslike. "First, full payment of the restaurant bill that was fraudulently charged to me," I stated clearly. "Second, a public acknowledgement of what was done. Third, the truth about my birth and place in this family to be openly acknowledged going forward." "You want money," Melissa accused. "That's what this is really about." "What I want is justice," I corrected her. "And an end to the lies." The doorbell rang, surprising everyone. Samantha opened the door to admit several extended family members whom I had invited to arrive at this specific time: Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, and 2 of my cousins. "What is this?" my father asked, looking alarmed at the expanding audience. "Transparency," I answered simply. "No more family secrets." As the relatives took seats around the periphery of the room, Nathan pulled Melissa aside for a whispered conversation. When they returned, his demeanor had changed completely. "On behalf of my wife and myself, I would like to offer a full apology for the events at Le Chateau," he said stiffly. "We will, of course, cover the entire bill and compensate you for any distress caused." Melissa's face flushed with anger, but she remained silent, clearly having been advised by Nathan that they had no choice. "And the truth about my birth?" I pressed, looking directly at my father. For a moment, I thought he might equivocate or make excuses. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and addressed the room. Amber is my biological daughter, he stated clearly. Not our adopted child as we've claimed all these years. Her mother was Elizabeth Thornton, with whom I had a relationship during a separation from Diane. When Elizabeth couldn't raise Amber, Diane and I agreed to bring her into our family, but we decided to present her as adopted rather than acknowledge my infidelity. The extended family members looked shocked, pieces of family history suddenly making new sense to them. That explains why she looks so much like Grandma Sophie, Aunt Patricia murmured. So Amber is actually a Harper by blood, Uncle Robert stated, looking at me with new understanding. Yes, my father confirmed. She is as much my daughter as Melissa. Melissa stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like she's the victim here, when she's the reason our family was broken in the first place. I was 3 years old when I came to live with you, I reminded her quietly. I didn't break anything. I was a child who needed a home. And you got one. Melissa shouted. You should have been grateful instead of always trying to take what was mine. What exactly did I take from you, Melissa? I asked. Less attention? Fewer opportunities? A smaller inheritance? Because from where I'm standing, you've had every advantage while I've had to fight for even basic recognition. For once, Melissa had no ready response. The evidence was too overwhelming, the audience too wide, the truth too plain for even her to spin. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. We've failed both our daughters, she said, tears in her eyes. Melissa, we allowed your jealousy and resentment to fester instead of addressing it. And Amber, we failed to give you the love and security you deserved out of our own guilt and shame. It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard her say. So what happens now? Uncle Robert asked, looking between us all. I looked at Taylor, who nodded encouragingly, then addressed my family. Now we start over, I said firmly. With the truth as our foundation. I am Richard Harper's daughter, Melissa's half-sister, and a full member of this family with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. I will no longer accept being treated as less than or separate from. And I will no longer participate in maintaining the lies that have shaped our family for 30 years. Nathan pulled out his checkbook. I'll write you a check for the restaurant bill right now, plus an additional amount for your trouble. The money is the least of it, I told him, though I didn't refuse the check. What matters is what comes next. For the first time in my life, I felt I was standing on solid ground with my family. The truth had been costly and painful, but it had also been liberating in ways I never expected. As I looked at the faces around me, I saw not just shock and discomfort, but also the first glimmers of something I'd been seeking my whole life, recognition of who I truly was and my rightful place among them. The weeks following the confrontation brought changes I could never have imagined. Melissa and Nathan's check cleared immediately, covering not just the restaurant bill but adding a substantial compensation for distress that Nathan had calculated with his banker's precision. I suspected his family's concern about potential scandal had influenced his sudden generosity. The public acknowledgement I had demanded came in stages. First, my parents sent a family-wide email explaining that they had misrepresented Amber's place in our family and clarifying that I was Richard's biological daughter. The carefully worded message stopped short of detailing Melissa's revenge plot, but it was a start. More significantly, my father contacted his attorney to update the family trust, legally acknowledging me as his daughter and adjusting the inheritance structure to treat both daughters equally. When I received the paperwork confirming these changes, I sat in my apartment and cried, not for the money, which was substantial, but for the acknowledgement it represented. The restaurant owner, who had been horrified to learn how his establishment had been used in Melissa's scheme, reached out personally to apologize. Le Chateau prides itself on discretion and proper conduct, he told me, offering a generous gift certificate along with his regrets. What happened to you in our dining room should never have occurred. The ripple effects in our social circle were immediate and far-reaching. Melissa, who had built her identity around being the perfect Harper daughter in the perfect marriage with the perfect life, found herself facing uncomfortable questions and cooler receptions. The story had spread, as stories do, and while the details varied in the telling, the core remained the same. Melissa had deliberately humiliated her sister and stuck her with an enormous bill as some sort of twisted revenge. Nathan's family was particularly displeased, concerned about how the incident reflected on their carefully maintained public image. Nathan's father, a prominent figure in local business circles, arranged a private lunch with me. "I want you to know that the Wilsons do not condone what happened," he said stiffly across the white tablecloth. "We raised our son to conduct himself with more integrity." Extended family members began reaching out to me individually, many apologizing for years of unknowingly participating in the family's unequal treatment of me. "I always wondered why you were positioned so oddly in family photos," my Aunt Patricia admitted during a coffee date. "Now it all makes horrible sense." My cousin Samantha became an even closer ally, inviting me to events I'd previously been subtly excluded from. "You're stuck with me now," she joked. Actual blood cousins. My parents worked to rebuild trust in their own ways. My father invited me to lunch, just the two of us, something that had never happened in my entire life. "I've been a coward," he admitted over sandwiches at a quiet cafe. "I've spent 30 years trying to hide my mistake instead of embracing my daughter. I can't undo that, Amber, but I'd like to try to be the father you deserve going forward, if you'll let me." My mother's efforts were more practical but no less meaningful. She began going through family photo albums, creating a new one that included photos of me she'd previously excluded, notes about my achievements alongside Melissa's, and even a few precious pictures she'd kept hidden of me as a baby with my biological mother. Elizabeth was kind, she told me hesitantly, showing me a faded photograph of a young woman with my dark hair and smile holding an infant. "She wanted what was best for you, and in her circumstances, she thought that was us. I didn't handle it well, but it was never because of you, Amber. It was my own insecurity and hurt." Melissa was required to attend family therapy sessions as a condition of remaining in the family trust, though her participation was grudging at best. During one particularly tense session, she finally articulated what had fueled her resentment all these years. "Everything changed when she arrived," Melissa said, refusing to look directly at me. "Before Amber, I was the center of our family. After, I was the reminder of what Dad did, what Mom forgave, what we were all pretending hadn't happened. I hated living that lie." "So you punished me for it," I said quietly. "For 30 years. She had no response to that. Nathan's attitude toward me shifted dramatically as he observed my handling of the situation. Where before he had treated me with dismissive contempt, he now demonstrated a wary respect, perhaps recognizing that I wasn't the pushover he'd assumed. "You've shown remarkable restraint," he told me at a family gathering, choosing his words carefully. "Many people would have pursued more aggressive legal action." "Justice and vengeance aren't the same thing," I replied. "I wanted the truth and proper accountability, not destruction." At our first real family dinner after the confrontation, Melissa tested the new boundaries by making a subtle dig about my teaching career compared to her executive position. "I'm sure finger painting with 5-year-olds is very rewarding," she said with a thin smile. In the past, I would have absorbed the insult silently. This time, I met her gaze directly. "Actually, Melissa, early childhood education shapes the foundation of how people relate to learning and to each other for their entire lives. Something to consider as you prepare for parenthood." The table fell silent, then my father unexpectedly chuckled. "She's got you there, Mel." Melissa looked startled, then thoughtful, perhaps realizing that the family dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Rachel and Samantha remained my steadfast supporters throughout this transformation, celebrating each small victory and providing perspective when I doubted myself. "Look at you, standing in your power," Rachel said proudly after I described a particularly successful boundary-setting moment with my mother. "The old Amber would have apologized for existing." I realized she was right. Something fundamental had changed within me. The revelation of my true identity, painful as it had been, had freed me from the impossible task of trying to earn a place in my family. I was a Harper by birth, by right, and no one could take that away from me anymore. As autumn approached and my graduate program in family counseling began, I found myself drawing on my own experience to connect with families struggling with their own secrets and dysfunctions. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, I told a group during a practice therapy session. It means acknowledging what happened and choosing a different path forward. I was living those words every day, navigating a new relationship with my family based on truth rather than fiction, on authentic connection rather than obligation. It wasn't always easy, and there were setbacks along the way, but for the first time in my life, I felt I was standing on solid ground. At a small dinner gathering at my apartment, my first time hosting a family event, I placed the framed receipt from Le Chateau on my desk, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a testament to my journey and the strength I'd found. "Is that what I think it is?" my father asked, noticing it as he helped carry dishes to the kitchen. "It is," I confirmed. "Not to hold a grudge, but to remember how far we've all come." He nodded slowly, understanding what I meant. "We have a long way still to go, but I'm grateful for the chance to try." As my guests gathered around my table, I looked at the faces of my family, complicated, flawed, but finally honest. And felt something I had searched for my entire life, the sense that I truly belonged. "Welcome to Amber's Harper housewarming," read the hand-lettered sign on the front door of my new home. 1 year after the anniversary dinner disaster that had changed everything, I stood in the entryway of my own house, a charming 3-bedroom craftsman I'd purchased with help from the updated family trust and my own savings. "I still can't believe this place is yours," Rachel said, arranging a tray of appetizers in the kitchen. "Remember when we used to dream about having actual dining rooms while eating ramen on your apartment floor?" I laughed, remembering our lean years together. Life takes unexpected turns. And what a turn mine had taken. After the confrontation and the family reckoning that followed, I had embarked on a year of profound transformation. My graduate program in family therapy had challenged and inspired me in ways I hadn't anticipated, with professors noting that my personal experience gave me unique insight into family dynamics. One professor in particular, Dr. Michael Brennan, had become more than a mentor. After working closely together on a research project about identity formation in blended families, our professional respect had blossomed into something deeper. He was coming to the housewarming tonight, our 5th official date, though I'd lost count of the coffee meetings and working dinners that had preceded our acknowledgement of mutual attraction. Samantha arrived early, bringing a stunning houseplant and her new boyfriend. "This place is gorgeous, Amber," she gushed, hugging me tightly. "So light and open, just like the new you." The doorbell rang continuously as guests arrived, colleagues from school, fellow teachers from my kindergarten class, friends who had supported me through the darkest days, and, most surprisingly, family members. Real relationships had formed with relatives who had previously kept me at a distance, now eager to know the authentic woman I was becoming. My parents arrived bearing a beautiful wooden salad bowl that had belonged to my grandmother Sophie, the grandmother I now knew was truly mine by blood. "She would have wanted you to have this," my father said, his eyes suspiciously bright. "She always said you had her spirit." In the year since the truth had emerged, my relationship with my father had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Free from the burden of his 3-decade lie, Richard Harper had finally allowed himself to be a father to me in ways he'd always held back before. Weekly lunch dates, phone calls just to check in, genuine interest in my studies and career, small things that most daughters took for granted but that were precious gifts to me. My mother's journey had been more complex. Decades of resentment and guilt couldn't disappear overnight, but Diane Harper was trying in her own way. She had begun therapy herself, working through her feelings about my father's infidelity and her decision to raise me as her own while keeping me emotionally at arm's length. "Your home is lovely," she said now, looking around with genuine appreciation. "You've always had an eye for making spaces feel welcoming." The biggest shock of the year had been Melissa and Nathan's divorce. The strain of the public embarrassment, coupled with Nathan's family's displeasure at the scandal, had cracked the perfect facade of their marriage. When Nathan's father threatened to remove him from succession at the family firm unless he got control of the situation, Nathan had chosen his inheritance over his marriage, filing for divorce 6 months after the confrontation. Melissa arrived alone, visibly pregnant, her designer outfit and perfect makeup a sharp contrast to the uncertainty in her eyes. Our relationship remained complicated, but the shattering of her perfect life had humbled her in unexpected ways. "Thank you for inviting me," she said quietly, handing me a carefully wrapped package. "I wasn't sure you would." Inside was a silver frame containing a photo I'd never seen before, Melissa and me as very young children, maybe 4 and 6, holding hands and laughing in the backyard sprinkler. "I found it in Mom's old albums," she explained. "I didn't remember us ever being that happy together, but apparently we were, once." It was the closest thing to an olive branch she had ever offered. I placed the photo prominently on the mantel. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked. "I have sparkling cider for the mom-to-be." A small smile flickered across her face. "That would be nice." My extended family had embraced me fully once the truth was known. Uncle Robert had been particularly supportive, involving me in family business discussions I'd previously been excluded from and updating his own will to include me as one of his nieces. "Always knew you were a Harper," he told me gruffly at a family dinner. "You've got the stubborn chin." The most unexpected development had been finding my birth mother. With my father's help, I had located Elizabeth Thornton, now Elizabeth Mercer, living in Colorado with her husband and 2 children, my half-siblings. Our reunion had been cautious but warm, filling in pieces of my identity puzzle I hadn't known were missing. "You have her laugh," my father had observed after my first video call with Elizabeth. I should have noticed that years ago. As my housewarming party gathered momentum, I found myself surrounded by a tapestry of relationships that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Rachel and Samantha, my unwavering supporters. Michael, whose intelligent kindness had opened my heart to possibilities I'd closed off after James. Extended family who now treated me as a full member of the clan. My parents, imperfect but trying. Even Melissa, navigating her new reality with more grace than I would have expected. In a quiet moment, I slipped into my home office where the framed Le Chateau receipt still held a place of honor, though now as a reminder of strength rather than humiliation. Beside it stood new photos, me in my graduation robe after completing my first year of the master's program, Elizabeth and her family beside mine in a slightly awkward but genuine group photo, the support group I'd founded for people with complex family situations at our first official meeting. Michael found me there, studying these touchstones of my journey. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, handing me a glass of wine. "I was just thinking about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the doorways to the best," I replied. If Melissa hadn't pulled that stunt at the restaurant, I might never have learned the truth. I might still be trying to earn my place in a family that was built on lies. "The truth has a way of finding the light," Michael observed. "Though usually not with a $3,000 price tag attached." I laughed. Best money I never actually had to spend. We rejoined the party, where my father was waiting to propose a toast. The room quieted as he raised his glass, his expression solemn but eyes warm. "To Amber," he said, his voice steady. "My daughter, who has taught our family more about courage, grace, and forgiveness than we ever taught her. Your home is beautiful because you are in it, and we are all better for having you in our lives." Glasses clinked as a murmur of agreement rippled through the room. I looked around at these people who had become my chosen family alongside my biological one, at the home I had created that was truly my own space in the world, and felt a sense of completion I had sought my entire life. Later, as guests began to depart, I found myself on the front porch with Rachel, looking up at the stars. "Did you ever imagine a year ago that this is where you'd be?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not in my wildest dreams. I was just trying to survive the humiliation. I never thought it would lead to all of this." I gestured to encompass not just the house, but the whole new life I had built. "You know what made the difference, don't you?" Rachel asked. "You stopped accepting crumbs and demanded the whole cake that was rightfully yours all along." As the evening wound down and I prepared to say goodbye to my remaining guests, I realized Rachel was right. The true transformation hadn't been in my circumstances but in myself. I had stopped being the grateful adopted child, the family afterthought, the perpetual outsider. I had claimed my identity, my history, and my rightful place, not just in the Harper family but in the world. What began as a humiliating rejection at a restaurant table had become the catalyst for the most authentic chapter of my life. In finding the courage to confront the lies that had shaped my existence, I had finally discovered the truth that set me free. If you've ever faced a family betrayal that forced you to redefine who you are, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Has someone's cruelty ever inadvertently led you to a better place? This journey taught me that sometimes our greatest pain becomes our greatest liberation, and I'm curious if you've experienced something similar. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share with others who might need to hear that family isn't just about blood or names, it's about truth, respect, and genuine connection. Thank you for witnessing my journey from that devastating dinner to the life I've built today. Remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into.